for joining us today for our weekly Wednesday press conference. I'm Representative Patrick Sellers, and I represent House District 57 in Jefferson County. As we begin this legislative session, House Democrats proposed an innovative and forward-thinking plan of action entitled the Plan for Prosperity. This bold, practical, and comprehensive agenda detailed the legislation necessary to propel Alabama on a trajectory toward long-term prosperity, and one of the most important parts of that plan is to safeguard and expand the right to vote. Alabama House Democrats understand that our constitutional right to vote in free, fair, and honest elections is the cornerstone of our democracy and essential to our community prosperity. The people of Alabama deserve to have their voices heard and votes counted, which means supporting voter education efforts and ensuring that the elderly, the infirm, and disabled can exercise their democratic rights. We must continue our efforts to remove unnecessary barriers and impediments from the election process so that no Alabama voter is ever denied their sacred right to vote. Sadly, last week, the Alabama House was on the wrong side of history when it passed House Bill 209, strictly along partisan lines, which will criminalize many of those who would help the elderly and disabled with their absentee ballots. Not only is this wrong, it also will have the chilling effect of causing some people to not to vote at all out of fear. It reminds me of days not too long ago in our nation's history when we had poll tests and poll taxes, which were clearly designed to keep black people from voting. How is this different? It appears to me that this bad piece of legislation targets the elderly, the disabled, and nonpartisan civic groups who are doing everything they can to increase voter participation and voter turnout. Voting is our fundamental right as a citizen. Our elections are secure and accurate. HB 209 doesn't prevent election fraud. It is a bill that suppresses the vote and makes people afraid. We need to make voting more accessible and easier, especially for those who genuinely need assistance or accommodations due to age or disability. I would now like to introduce Representative Jackson from House District 68.
Thank you, Representative Sellers. When you mentioned being on the wrong side of history, you made it very clear and plain for the moment that we're about to enter into. It relates to voting. Since our founding of this great nation, it has been a moral and a political issue. But we know that the intent of the Constitution was to ensure the eligibility of every citizen the right to vote. And somewhere we read about the right to vote in the Constitution. The preamble, holding these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator. As you know, the right to vote in America was initially only for white men who own property. It wasn't until the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920 when women, and let me relate, white women, was able to vote, and that was half of the country. My colleague spoke of poll tax, and they aren't were not abolished, because what we are going through now is a form of poll taxes. In 1964, as a nation, we have struggled and bled over the most basic right. Today, we are still struggling, but we will not quit this fight because our nation is too strong and the people are too determined. And we are found on the bedrock and principles of government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. For our democracy to prosper and flourish, it is vital that we increase our voting turnout. And to everything, we must have increase in participation and not suppression. Our colleagues across the aisle should be making it more accessible for people to vote, rather than taking away that right that we've already gained some 57 years prior. We must enact legislation to allow for automatic voting registration at the age of 18, curbside voting, early voting, and guaranteed absentee voting. I've introduced 2 bills in the last 12 years as it relates to early voting, taking 1 day out of 4 weeks before the election. 67 precincts in the county. Each clerk in those counties could choose what day they will open up for early voting. I introduced legislation to take away the unexcused absentee. Why would she have to lie about where we're going to be on voting day? People don't want to stand in line all day, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, and 3 hours just to vote. Furthermore, we must streamline the process, restoring the voting rights to those who have paid their debt to society. The right to cast an absentee ballot should guarantee no one should ever have to make an excuse of exercising his right. I say until allowed about it. No one should fear going to prison because they need to help fill out an absentee ballot. As the late and great Congressman John Lewis said, freedom is not a state, it is an act. It is not some enhanced garden perched high and on distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is a continuous action we must all take. Each generation must do its part to create an even more fair and more society of justice. This is why the right to vote is a sacred part of our endeavor, because without this right, we cannot be free and we cannot prosper. Thank you, and I would like to introduce my colleague, Representative Hassell from House District 78.
Thank you, Representative Jackson. I agree that freedom is the continuous action we must all take, especially when it comes to protecting our right to vote. As we strive to become a more perfect union, it is also an acknowledgement of our common imperfection and our humanity. We can all agree that we sometimes make mistakes and forget things or even get confused. But I mention this because one of the issues we have with the absentee voting process is that sometimes people don't fill the form out correctly. They may forget to sign it or put a date on it. Perhaps they don't even see the line on the form when they have to give an excuse to even use the form. This is why I'm supporting HB 142, which will allow for an elected manager to contact the voter if their form was not filled out correctly or completely. It gives the voter the opportunity to fix any errors to the election and ensure that their vote is counted. Right now, the vote would not be counted if the person did everything correctly, but simply forget to put the date on the form or even sign it. You should not have your vote ignored or cast to the side because you mistakenly put your address on the wrong line on the form. This is a common sense bill that simply allows mistakes to be corrected and does not in any way affect the integrity and security of our election. We know that every single vote is important and that this bill will help ensure that you cast an absentee ballot, that your vote counts. As Representative Jackson said, the right to vote is sacred because without this right, we cannot be free and we cannot prosper. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Representative Clarke from House District 97. Representative Clarke.
Thank you, Representative Hassell, and good afternoon. As we indicated in our legislative agenda titled Plan for Prosperity, we know that our shared prosperity depends on our ability to exercise our freedom to vote and participate in our cherished democracy. That is why we should do everything in our power to expand and protect the right to vote, rather than suppressing it or denying it. This is particularly true when it comes to some of our most vulnerable citizens, such as seniors and those with disabilities. That is the reason that I and my colleagues strongly opposed House Bill 209 and voted against it. We did so because it makes it a crime to assist those who need help the most. And it suppresses the vote using fear, as one of my colleagues already stated, as a tactic. It's morally wrong, and it doesn't do anything, it doesn't do one thing to make our elections more secure or accurate. Also, the bill assumes that older or disabled voters all have family members who can help them fill out an absentee ballot application or an absentee ballot affidavit. Well, we all know that assumption is far from the truth, and that not all people have family that they can rely on for help. Had we not been clotured last week, Democrats were prepared to offer several amendments that would at least make House Bill 209 a little bit better. One of those amendments would have allowed nonprofit organizations like the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, churches, and other nonprofit 501c3 organizations to continue assisting individuals with the absentee voting process. We also wanted to offer an amendment that would provide a grace period or waive the first offense if anyone violated HB 209 as it is written and proposed. We envision that neighbors and many other well-intentioned individuals will be caught off guard if this bill passes. They will continue to be neighborly. Many will continue assisting elderly neighbors with absentee voting until they are personally notified in writing of a potential violation. House Bill 209 states that the Secretary of State, probate judges, and absentee election managers or their designees can assist voters with absentee voting. Now, it is absolutely unrealistic to believe that these individuals can take up the slack of hundreds of volunteers who assist voters with absentee voting during every election. It's not humanly possible and will cause a huge decrease in the number of voters who vote absentee. That's a sad thought, especially considering that the absentee voting process is very confusing and many people need assistance to complete it correctly. That is why I sponsored House Bill 100, which would allow a disabled voter to designate an individual of their choice to deliver a voter's absentee ballot application or the ballot to the absentee election manager. This is an important bill for disabled people who may have mobility issues or other functional limitations and do not have a family member who can assist them. They too are citizens, and they have just as much right to have their vote counted as anyone else. To put it simply, it's the right thing to do for voters who require assistance, and it respects their freedom to choose a person whom they feel comfortable with and whom they trust. I will conclude by reiterating that the right to vote must not only be protected, but it must be expanded. The recent fake claims of election fraud have brought about unnecessary and damaging changes to our election process, changes that suppress the right to vote, or in some cases, deny it altogether. That is not how we prosper as a democracy. Since my colleague quoted Congressman John Lewis, I will do the same and leave you with his wise and inspirational words when the congressman said, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something. You have to do something. Now we have made our voices heard, and now we must take action to preserve our sacred right to vote. We thank you for coming and covering our press conference, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Considering Representative Keel's legislation that you guys are referring to, From your perspective, is there anything redemptive in it, or does it need to be gone whole cloth?
It is a bad bill. As our colleague Representative Chris England of Tuscaloosa said when he went to the floor to debate that bill, it is the worst bill he's ever seen. And I concur. Yes, ma'am.
I like the when you said designating people to help you fill the application out. I think that is an awesome way to make sure everybody's rights are not violated when it comes to being able to vote. And you listed the probate judge. Who else did they identify as being potential individuals to help them with that?
The bill states that the Secretary of State and probate judges and absentee election managers or their designees can assist people with absentee voting. Now let's be real. Many of my constituents, and I mean no disrespect, have no idea where the Secretary of State is or what he does or how to reach him. And in Mobile, if they were to reach out, it's going to be by phone, probably, or maybe by email. And that's just not sufficient. I have helped many senior citizens. I have about 5 or 6 senior citizen complexes in my district. The best way to assist them is to go and sit down with them. And mind you, they want help with the application. Then they want help with filling out that confusing affidavit, which duplicates the information that is on the absentee ballot application. They don't want me to look at their ballot. They fill that out on their own, and they said, all right, which envelope do I put that in? They put it in that envelope, and they seal it. And then they depend on me to make sure that it is packaged correctly and put it in the mail to them. This bill would make a criminal of me. It would not allow me to help those seniors who so desperately want to vote and need assistance in that process.
I've done the same thing. I've gone around and vote. There's an individual that I went to help to vote who is still signing X for his name. You know, so that's where if we start violating their right to vote, then it's just sad.
It will be, if this bill passes, it will be a sad day in the state of Alabama.
Thank you so much.
The NAACP and the NAACP and some other voting organizations have said if this, passes and is signed by Governor Ivey, they're prepared to sue the state. Is that something that you all would be in support of?
I think some of those organizations are not optimistic that they think this bill will pass, and I think they are posturing themselves to sue the state of Alabama, and that is their right.
I had a question for Representative Hassell. Right now, if somebody is filling out their ballot incorrectly, say they put the date in the wrong place, the address in the wrong place, is that thrown out, or is it counted as a provisional ballot? I just wasn't clear.
No, that particular ballot will be thrown out.
Wow. So it's not even considered a provisional, like
no.
They don't meet to discuss it. It's just your vote just doesn't count because you put the date in the wrong place?
No, it doesn't count. They'll throw it out. If the provisional ballots, or if they're missing the ID, or in that ballot, so they'll hold that ballot and probably I think they get in contact, Representative Clarke, but they get in contact with and hold that ballot to count it once they get the accurate information.
I see. So your bill would allow for them to actually give them time to make the ballot count.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
And we've been told, Representative Hassell and I, we've been meeting with some folk in an effort to try to get the bill carried. In fact, he's carrying that bill for the League of Women Voters, which has made this recommendation. We don't recall the number of states, I don't, that already have laws that allow voters to have their affidavits cured if they leave off a signature, for example, or the date or some other, if they don't fill out another blank or they put the information in the wrong place. But we met with some circuit clerks to try to get their buy-in on this bill, and sadly, I mean, we were disappointed. We only met with 4, but I think they speak for the majority of the circuit clerks, and they are not in favor of this bill. They think that it will require a whole lot of work And so they are opposed to it. Now, mind you, they have another recommendation, and we're gonna work with them on this. And that recommendation is to make the absentee ballot application and the affidavit more user-friendly. That would help a whole lot. So we're working on that, and I think Representative Hassell is going to be dropping a bill on tomorrow.
That's right.
That will allow, we have to take it a step at a time. The current law states explicitly what information has to be on the affidavit. And so he has a bill that would allow us to revise that. So we hope that that's going to pass.
Yes, it just make the affidavit a lot plainer and simpler for people to fill out, because they're duplicating the questions from the application and on the affidavit.
What number is that? What number is it?
Well, we're still working on the bill right now. We don't have the bill number. We haven't dropped it.
Well, actually, he's trying to get 105 co-sponsors on that
That's
bill.
right.
That's what.
And to provide more context to the penalties associated with House Bill 209, it's akin to being charged with a Class B or a Class C felony. That's just as though you gave a sheet of paper. Now you can be charged as if you are a person who committed a crime of burglary or robbery in the state of Alabama.
That's crazy.
That's to put it into context on helping someone to vote. This is voter suppression 2.0.
Exactly.
And this is what it is. New age of it.
And right now, many of these nonprofit organizations will set up tables, outside of stores, retail operations, and they'll have applications, voter registration applications, and they may also have absentee voting applications. And now, if this bill passes, they can only give out the form to register to vote. They would not be able to provide the public with the other form, which means that if you wanted an application then to get an absentee ballot, you either have to go to your absentee election manager's office, which could mean, a 30-minute trip or longer for some people, or you can get it offline. We know that unfortunately there is still a huge digital divide in this nation. Not everybody has a computer or access to the internet. So that's going to create a burden for many people who want to vote absentee.
What's the purpose of not being able to give, you're not having to fill it out, but you can't even give them one?
Exactly. It's just what Representative Tillman just stated. You will not even be able to hand somebody an application. Now, how ridiculous is that?
So what if we wanted to have like a town hall or a session on how to complete the absentee ballot? Would we be able to do that?
You could hold an informational
Yes.
session,
Yeah.
but you cannot hand out the application.
Don't give one the application. Don't give anybody the application with this bill.
But this
Wow.
that the bill does not pass.
Right, you're talking about this bill.
So we hope this bill doesn't pass.
Representative England made a statement on the floor, and I put it in context. He said his son, if I give my son, because in the bill also they give a designee, which can be your son, right? But if I give my son just like here $20 for gas, now it's a Class B felony, your own child, according to this bill. So, and they give it more context of how, like Representative Clarke stated, it's bad legislation. It's real bad.
Your son could handle your application of ballot for you, but you cannot pay him. You cannot give. Representative England's interpretation was that if he gave his son $10 in gas money to go and obtain that absentee ballot application from the absentee election manager's office, that could be considered payment, and that would be a felony.
Does the bill as presented by the sponsors, does it have an automatic reporting component to it, or there's no automatic reporting component?
And when with some debate on the floor, we debate in the committee, and that's the question we asked. Like, who would police this? Who would call and say this is happening or this was going on? So it's not in the bill. But the problem I have, or I think we all have, would be just somebody just saying something. You can have a candidate who mad he lost and say, well, it was fraud. and I got a witness there where I know they paid this person, or I saw them pass out an absentee ballot to discredit, and that's all it takes.
And let's be honest, I mean, as candidates, we seek every vote that we can get, whether it is an in-person vote cast at the poll or whether it's an absentee vote. We all do it. Democrats, Republicans. In fact, this may hurt the Republican Party more than it may hurt, Democrats. It is a common strategy that is used in campaigning.
That's right.
If there are no other questions, we thank you all.